By wisdom a house is built, and by understanding it is established, and by knowledge the rooms are filled with all pleasant and precious riches. Proverbs 24, verses 3 and 4. Hello, ladies. Welcome to Homemakers Radio. I hope you'll get a lot done while you listen, and I can keep you company without getting in your way. You know, housekeeping and homemaking and being a full-time at home is very isolating, but there is no other way to do it. You'll have to accept the fact it's an isolating job. Many jobs are isolating even if you're working outside of the home. There are just some things you cannot do in a group. In fact, I think it's less efficient sometimes to have to work together. If you've ever worked with a church to get a building cleaned or prepare some kind of special meal, it is a little more tedious. It takes a little longer. You have to please everybody. You have to go through everybody. You have to find out who wants to do what and divide up all the chores. Whereas homemaking, it is isolating, but you can be independent and you're on your own. And you can make up for the isolation by showing hospitality. That is just a wonderful way to make up for all the time you've had to spend by yourself. But you just can't do this in a group unless it's your own children. And even then, they will be doing their own tasks, and they might not all be, it's impossible for everyone to share a broom and sweep at once. So everything is individual in the home. And I would like to know if you have something to do, if you would please go and do that while you're listening. But before you go, I'm going to show you my teacup. It's uh, it's really interesting, and I believe that it was probably made in the 1990s. I can tell sometimes by the pattern on it and the fact that there's no name for the pattern. This is just said it was made in England, but it seems like it was some kind of giftware that came out in the 1990s with maybe it was probably with a book, or I've seen things like this in the shops in the 1990s. They were quite prolific with teacups in those days. And I have been outside. You can see I'm wearing my plaid shirt and my corduroy skirt. I have already been outside and pulled a little bit of grass and some weeds, did a little gardening, planted a few seeds. We are in our planting season, and it was just dreary and overcast out there. But before I went, I got bathed and dressed and fixed my hair, and I went outside, and I felt like what one of the authors of a book about flowers had written way back in the 1800s. I don't know who it was, but I still remember it, and it was, I have to get dressed up so that I can go see my flowers today. And I felt like what I had said yesterday is don't dress in such a way as to contradict your surroundings. I was going to go do my gardening, and although there's a lot of dirt involved, there are some beauties involved, and you're in the fresh air. And today was some misty water coming down. It wasn't droplets of rain, but you could feel the mist. You could feel the light sprinkling, and so I just held my face up to the sky and let it come down. And I think that's a wonderful experience if you have your children around you now, to take them out there. I don't care how old they are. Let them go and feel it. We talked a little bit about innocence in the last video, I did anyway, and some ways, don't you wish sometimes we feel like our childhood went too fast. Well, you can restore some of that sweet childhood innocence with little actions like that, and just going out and feeling that mist on your face. And I really think it's probably the best beauty treatment. So because it also beautifies your soul in the fact that you realize there's a creator, and that you are so grateful when you go out and experience things like that. The other thing I'd like to show you before you go is I spoke to you about your kitchen towels and your tea towels, and I said that I kept them separate for the laundry. So I have this little tiny laundry basket. I got it at the dollar store, and this is where I put the soiled kitchen towels, which I don't use day after day after day. I change them every single day, and that way they don't get thrown in the wash with the bath towels and the towels that you have put on your wet hair, and they don't have hair on them when they're finished. And generally, if your washer and dryer are kept pretty clean, you can keep those things clean too. And ladies, it's a little bit chilly here today, and So, and it was dark when I was out, still a little bit overcast and dark. So I decided that I would spend the rest of the hour talking to you since it was so early and no one is up yet and there's no noise going on, except you can hear the roar of the dishwasher in the distance. So today, if you have something to fold, if you have something to load or unload, I made these videos originally for cleaning a bedroom. That seems to be the most tedious thing, especially if in a little squashed area like the manse where I live, which is this tiny cottage with tiny little rooms. I'm sitting in the tiniest room in the house. I'm thinking it's probably 6 feet by probably 6 by 6. It is so tiny. A little twin bed fits in here. I wasn't quite sure what to do with this room, and it may be turned into a sitting room, an office, a reading room. I'm not sure what all I want to do. Maybe I'll make a shop out of it, uh, to put some of my handicrafts in, or to sell things I don't want anymore, or maybe we'll make a studio out of it for designing garments. I don't know what all I'll do with this, but right now I'm broadcasting from it. And so I wanted to tell you that if you've got something you need to do, I found that the bedrooms were, to me, the hardest, especially if you're in squashed up spaces and you have to get in on one side and make the bed and then go over and get on the other side, and then you want to take all the covers off and change the sheets, and they have to be piled a certain way while you do that. And I always thought that listening to something made it go past so fast. In fact, when we were children growing up, when we had huge amount, we were from a large family, so of course the work was really huge. When we had tasks that we had to do, whether it was weeding the garden or harvesting the garden or doing the dishes, we always sang. And by the time you got through 4 or 5 verses of the hymn book, a song in the hymn book, we always said, Mother and Daddy were really good about leaving getting the extra song books, or maybe purchasing them from the church when they changed over to a new kind. And so we always had songbooks around, and we knew all those songs, and soon we knew them all by heart. And it could get you through a job so well. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about your appearance. And the reason that I start this out with appearance, as you noticed, I got dressed up for my garden, and then I was dressed up for you, so I didn't have to go and do it again. And I don't have to worry about changing when I go out. Of course, I realize in this era, nobody worries about that, but I do. I liked, my mother-in-law would always change before she went to the grocery store, because she was in the house dress that she put on when she first got up, so that she put her apron over it, and then she would get busy fixing breakfast and putting in her laundry, and she would change. If she had to go somewhere, she would not wear that house dress somewhere. I think people get the wrong idea about these house dresses. They were for the house, and they weren't to be worn out. I see people trying to make them and wear them all over the place, but really they weren't all that pretty. They were more functional, and so we didn't wear them anywhere else, and our mothers and grandmothers didn't actually like them that much. They were suitable for the home, for doing work that would mess up something that was a little dressier. But of course now we can wear just anything in the home and put on an apron over it. So to take care of your appearance, I think it's really important, because it says that you are important. It says that you think you are doing something of worth, and that you are somebody who's worthy. And I know people who have not felt well or been sick, but they will still get up, get a shower, get dressed, maybe have to go lay down again, but they feel better. And I think that also, if you're depressed, it helps a lot to get up and get yourself ready and to improve your appearance. It somehow has an effect on you. And I've heard about people who have gone to places where they were helping people, maybe in church work or something, and they were always very careful to dress up. And I think the story was written called Christie, and I had that book when I was growing up. And this lady said in the book, the one that had written the book, that was apparently about her grandmother, but she said, she quoted this woman named Christie saying, that for the reason to improve their mood and their attitude at the school that she was teaching in, she made very special care to take care of herself, to take extra care of her health and her hair and her clothing, and to always look pleasant and to give an example. I think that's really important at home, even if you're alone. It's too tempting to let yourself go, and in order to get any of, excuse me, in order to get any of these things done that you need to be done and get them done efficiently, you have to feel good about yourself. How can you feel good about yourself if you know you're not prepared? So your preparation has to come first, and that is your appearance. That is the place for where, that's your starting point, getting ready. And once you have that, yourself put together, then it's like a starting point for you. It's like you have a flashlight on or something, and you're pointing the way. Somehow with your looks, you're pointing the way. And you know, we minister to others from where? From our voices, from our smile and expression, and from our eyes, and also our appearance. First thing people will see about you is probably your hair and your garments, and then they'll look a little more closely and see your eyes, and then they'll move down your face and see your expression. So think about that. Think about how important that is. And also, we want to go on to housework in a minute. And housework is interesting because you have to have some soul in it, some emotion in it. You can't just clean it like it was some utilitarian job that you have to get over with, because you have to put some heart into it and some feeling into it, because this isn't a place you're just going to work. This is a place you live. This is a place where other people live, and you want them to be happy. And as your children are growing up, you want them to have good memories of it and to come back. And I know that when I was growing up, there were children who lived in homes where the mother just didn't care, and they rarely went back when they got older. They wanted to move on and to raise themselves up a little bit higher and have nice, a clean area to live in. And so if you want to build a relationship with your family, I think it's really important to make sure that the things in your home work for you. If your dishes are dirty and piled in the sink, they're not working for you anymore. If your dishwasher has not been unloaded, it's not going to be able to work for you. If your laundry is piled high, the washing machine is not going to be working for you. Or if you haven't hung it on the line, the line isn't going to be working for you. So all these things were created, many of them in the Victorian times, to tell you the truth, to make the homemaker's life easier. And so your house, if it's not clean and it's not pleasing to look at, isn't really serving you, because it serves you more than just work. It serves you in an emotional and spiritual way too. It's a place where people will think. It's a place where people's minds can wander, and they don't have all the distraction of the whole world. And so when they're no longer when your children have grown up, they're no longer at home, and they're not small anymore, they're going to have it embedded in them about your home and what it looked like and what areas they want to create in their own homes where they use the same principles. Of course, we don't want them to think that they have to copy every single thing that we do, or have the same style or the same colors or the same kind of furniture. Well, of course, their lives will be different. Their needs will be different depending on the size of their family and the type of work they're in, but we want them to have the same principles of order and of how a home is a servant to you, but also how to make it a place. It has so many functions, you know. It just has so many functions. It's a place of hospitality, but first of all, get used to being hospitable to your own family. Practice on your own family. Practice dinners and tea times on your own family, because you'll become more comfortable with it. And then when you decide you want to show hospitality, it'll take away all that nervousness. You'll just serve what you are used to making, and you'll know the routine for cleaning it up and getting it ready. And at least once a week, please put a tablecloth on your table and set the table and treat the dinner like a celebration. It's really important for the children. They love those ceremonial type things. So there was an era, I think, that our our world went through where people looked down on formality and where they would make fun of a formal dinner, make fun of you'd be accused if you tried to have a candlelit dinner. You'd be accused of being Mrs. Bouquet on keeping up appearances, and they'd laugh at you, and or they were amused by it. And there was that attitude. I don't think is excuse me. I keep kicking this little table. That attitude, I'm not sure where it came from, but it was like someone said in a recent comment, a dumbing down, where you felt like maybe you shouldn't be so formal, maybe you shouldn't be so careful to serve your family on with plates and cutlery and real glassware, that maybe you should not be so formal. And a lot of people were sucked into that. They didn't want people to think that they were too strict or that they were too snobbish, and that's the first thing you'll get accused of. And people like to make fun of the tea time and drinking out of the teacups. But see, that is where we're coming to something called refinement. I want to talk to you about that when we get down to the talking about dealing with people, and which is we usually do appearance and then homemaking, housework. I'm just looking around here to see if I missed anything. I have quite a bit to talk to you about today. I'm not sure if I'll get it for the whole hour, but I hope that you will use it to clean a bedroom, because there's more than just making the bed. A bedroom is just very hard. Most of us have things in our bedroom that have to be looked after. In one of my rooms, I have a table and a tea set and a place to make tea with a kettle, and I also have a bookshelf in there, and it's amazing what you can cram into a bedroom. I really think with the house plans that the bedrooms ought to be bigger and the living room ought to be smaller, because we often we don't have TVs anymore. People don't keep a living room with a great big television anymore. It's not like the hotel lobby anymore. And so very few people will sit in that room. They prefer their own rooms because they usually have a desk there, and they have their own computers and their own books, and maybe even a place where they make their own coffee or tea, and I think or refreshments. And children have their own possessions and playthings. And I really think the bedrooms ought to be a lot bigger and the living rooms smaller, because it's rare to get everybody in there very often together, except maybe once a day. And even then, you wouldn't need as much space as they're giving living rooms. I would suggest smaller living rooms, bigger bedrooms, and maybe a few sitting rooms instead, or a family room. So now that I have talked about the house and the home and making it work for you, I want to go on to manners and refinement. And many of you probably wonder what in the world I'm doing, but I have mentioned homeschooling, but I know that a lot of you aren't interested in homeschooling, I mean in doing it yourself, or don't have any reason to do it yourself. So what I have been doing, since I liked it so much and there was so much information that I enjoyed from it, I'm just telling you, I'm just teaching you, I'm homeschooling you. And I can't talk you into homeschooling, just like I couldn't talk you into being a Christian. We learned this a long time ago. If you have to talk somebody into something, then you've got to coach them continually to keep them interested. So what we do is I would just suggest you order yourself a book from a Becca or what's that other? There was another supply company, and I've forgotten what it was called. Sunshine something or other. I'll find that and put that on the post for you. Order yourself a book and homeschool yourself. Just read it, write in a writing book, and just do all it says, and homeschool yourself. And you know, when the Bible says first take the log out of your own eye before trying to attempt to take the splinter out of someone else's, it might be not really wise to just go through a book, and then you can see why people are so enthusiastic about this, and just homeschool yourself, and then you can convince yourself, and nobody has to talk you into it, and it'll give you confidence also. So I would say if you have your children at home during this time, that you just train them in maybe 4 things that you can do all by yourself, and you can find materials for it or make up your own. And one is uh, train them in their personal habits, their possessions, taking care of their own possessions, their own clothes, maybe learning to do their own laundry and ironing. Train them in the care of their own person, what I call preparation, personal preparation. Train them in grooming, train them in bathing, train them in how to dress and how to look good, and train them in their politeness around the family. This is really, really important, to love one another. Then also you can move on to writing and art and singing and music. And music is really, really important, because have you ever wondered why some of the songs of the early days of America they're I guess you would call them country songs, or it's kind of like in Europe they had the country dances and the country songs and the folk songs of the era. Well, they seemed sometimes some of them seemed rather strange. They'd be talking, do a ballad about somebody getting lost in the hills and finding something else and whatever, because life was hard, and this music calmed the soul and seemed to help. Music gives the heart a rhythm to sing by, and in the olden days, everybody seemed to have a fiddle. Well, a fiddle was portable. You could take it with you wherever you went. They were often very small, and then in the evening, after a hard day's work, you could play the fiddle, and it gave pleasure to the family, to the home, and to anyone else around. And so, if you can possibly learn to play something that's portable, I think that's tremendous. And I noticed some of these families on YouTube that have come out and helped people by cheering them up with these free songs and their with their music. Sometimes a child can play 3 or 4 of these instruments. They can play the mandolin, they can play the fiddle, they can play the banjo, they can play the guitar, they can play all this stuff. They know how to transpose it all. It's so interesting. And so if you can learn to play something, or your children, can you get them to play something? Sometimes you can join the old-time fiddlers, and every state has them, and I think some of the provinces in Canada have old-time fiddlers. And these are old people who have fiddles and want to pass down the music and the talent to the younger generation to keep it alive. And because the fiddle music has a story to tell. I think that one of my grandchildren learned one tune called the Immigrant's Lament, and I thought that was really interesting. That must have been hard, to leave your country and your kin and come over and start a new life. And many of us have felt that anyway, because we left our families to get married and go far away, and you do feel it sometimes, and this music seems to reflect it, because sometimes these instruments actually can talk. And so if you can possibly get them in, old-time fiddlers, it doesn't cost very much. It's sometimes they'll give you a flat rate like $20 for the whole family, for and I don't know, maybe a month, I don't know. I'm not sure. You just have to look. And if anyone needs an instrument like a fiddle, sometimes they will give you one or lend you one. And there are people who we've had people that just gave theirs to us because they were getting too old and they were moving and downsizing, and they would give one of my grandchildren a fiddle. So that might not be what you want to do, but you can always learn to sing in harmony. You can always learn to sing in 4-part harmony. You can always learn. A cappella is so portable. You don't need to know where your instrument is. You don't have to repair the strings. You don't have to worry about losing it. You can go anywhere with a cappella, and that means unaccompanied. So these are some things that you can do at home with your family. And if you're alone, sometimes music is and singing are a great solace. Now I want to get to, I'm teaching you and talking to you the way I did when my family was growing up, because most of our lessons, I use the books from ABEC and other companies. I use them for um, auxiliary. They just, I'd buy a history book or I'd buy something and just lay it there and they could read it. But my teaching and my talking and our interaction together was really our learning. So I'm talking to you that way. I'm no different to you than I would have been to my children. So the way I'm talking is I'm just talking and trying to impart some ideas to you, and maybe you could catch on and probably do better. And this was my goal, that they would do better, that they would think of more ideas, better ideas, and go beyond me. And they will. Your children will, and I'm sure you will too. A lot of you are a lot smarter than I am. So I wanted to talk to you about I want to just show you my newsletter today, right here. And I divided it into 3 sections because I could get more in it. I found I could get more in it. I write big for some reason, and so this helped me to write smaller. And today, what I was talking about in my newsletter, Elect Lady, is refinement. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, because we're going to talk about people and personalities, and because you are going to be dealing with that in the home, even if all you have around you are your children and your own family, your own husband, you are going to be dealing with your personality and other people's personalities. So now, refinement. The definition of refinement is, you see, I didn't even realize refinement was in the Bible till I had children and I started homeschooling, and I realized, my goodness, we're going to have to learn something about manners and courtesy. And does the Bible talk about it? So I looked up the word refinement, and I was pleasantly informed that refinement was in the Bible and refining was in the Bible. And the definition from the 1828 dictionary is separating the dross from metals from the dregs. The dross from the dregs. And that was a system of heating a metal, and then all the dirt and oily stuff would come to the top, and you could skim it off. And anything, I'm trying to think, there are other things that you can refine. I once passed around in a girls class that I passed around and had it in my home, a refinement class. I passed around a jar of crude oil, and then I passed around something else that was made of oil but was refined, more refined, and showed them the difference. And so that it's the dark stuff that is not desirable is taken out. So refinement also means polish of language and manners. And in the 1828 dictionary, they always, after they defined a word, would put a sentence in it to illustrate it, which I really like that. So this is how it read. Polish of language and manners. Quote, crude language is unrefined. Now in the Bible, here's how it defines refinement. The words of the Lord are pure words. See, refinement is purity of something. It's the opposite of impurities. And so when you refine something, you take all the impurities out of it. Like when you're refining gold, you're taking all the impurities out of it. It's called dross. The words of the Lord are pure words, like silver refined in a furnace on the ground, purified 7 times. Psalms 12 verse 6. If you could possibly go and see how something is refined, that would be quite an eye-opener. Sometimes in the olden days, we used to be allowed to go on these tours of these places, smelting factories, different things. Like there are several places around here where you can see how things are made, or how they go from the raw stage to the refined stage. And so here's another verse that was included. Behold, I have refined you, but not as silver. I have tried you in the furnace of affliction. Isaiah 48:10. Well, these people would have known what that meant because they knew what these furnaces were for refining gold and or silver. And in here I've told you before that a lot of people will say the Bible has nothing to do with money. Well, silver was mentioned all through the Bible, and quite close to the beginning of it was silver. It was talking about these places in the Fertile Crescent, where around where civilization first began in the Bible. It would say something like, and this is the place where the silver was. And so, yes. And of course, they found out quite quickly how to refine that silver by heating it and taking the dross off and making it nice and shiny. And I did pass around a silver spoon that was tarnished, and a cloth, and I passed it around the class. Everybody would wipe it a little bit until by the time it came back, it was very shiny and pure, and all the dross was taken off. And so I kept one that was tarnished so that I could show them the difference. And I was trying to teach them about refining their personality, taking away the things that are undesirable out of your personality. So we will get to that too, and so I will be telling you that. So in order to be refined, there are a couple of things you're going to have to give up. You're going to have to give up crude language. You're going to have to give up negative thinking. You're going to have to give up a hopelessness or depressing attitudes. You're going to have to give all that up in order to be refined. You've got to take all that dross off. You can't be like that if you want refinement in your life. And refinement is most desirable because notice that teacup up on the shelf up there. Do you think that would be as attractive if it didn't have something shiny and pretty on it? And not to say that primitive things aren't beautiful, but to make the point that when you keep things in your personality that are unattractive and unrefined, the true worth does not come out. You can compare it to silver. So here's what I wrote in my newsletter, and I'll put a picture of that for you. Towards a more cheerful and beneficial attitude. Having a can-do attitude builds people up and keeps you from discouragement. So while you are saying something nice to someone, you're building them up, but you're also feeding it back into you. So if you're saying, if you're in the habit of saying something gloomy, opposite of every bit of good news that comes along, or anything that anyone has to say, or any observation anyone makes, and then you decide to come back with a negative remark, you're feeding that back into you. And by the end of the day, I don't think you're going to be a very happy person. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person. This was really quite eye-opening here, because it comes from Matthew 15:11. I used to look at this scripture in a different way, but when it was included in a list of refining things, I saw it differently. It is not what goes into the mouth that defiles a person, but what comes out of the mouth. This defiles a person. So the words that you speak, they can be refining, they can be beautiful, they can build up others, or they can destroy. But at the same time, what it's saying is they defile you, your own words. When you say them, they're going in here into your heart, and they into your mind. Your own words are defiling you. Not yes, of course, it's going to tear somebody else down. It's going to defile somebody else, but it also defiles you. So having a can-do attitude builds people up and helps you to keep from discouragement. So it's not what goes into the mouth, but what goes out of the mouth. And you could be living all alone. You could be the only person on top of a mountain. And if you said something depressing, go in here and it would tear you down. It may take you a while to understand this, but when you start changing, then you notice it. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, Lord. Psalms 19:14. Yes, keep those words sweet. Wasn't there a poem about that? That I'm careful what I say each day about my words, because I never know when I'm going to have to eat them. Don't you remember that poem from the olden days? Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. The words have an effect on your mind. They have an effect on your thinking. They have an effect on you. Romans 12:2. This is hard to understand. If you take this is why I'm going to go into some of these homeschool books, because not that I'm not trying to pressure you into homeschooling, but I'm just going to homeschool you. And that is, this verse is in one of those textbooks. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And it's in a handwriting book. And it's also in the grammar book, and you have to dissect it. And then you have to talk about it a little bit. So that one lesson from the handwriting book could carry you all day. Could carry you all day just thinking about it. That's why I don't believe in having 12 books stacked up and all your kids are going to go through these books all day long. I don't believe in that. I just give them a thought and use that for your grammar, use it for your spelling, use it for your character building lessons. You can even use it for art. You can use it for science, and you can use it for the Proverbs, the study of the human mind. You can use it for history too, in many ways. So now we talked about what would come out of your mouth and how that affects the heart. A cheerful heart is like good medicine, but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. If you've ever been crushed, do you know what that feels like? It makes you feel like totally withdrawing. It makes you feel like you never want to be around that person again that has crushed you. You want to just cut them off. You just want to get away because it's so abhorrent to you. And people can't thrive in an atmosphere of criticism all the time and being crushed and bad news, constant bad news. Are you a joy giver, or are you a bad news giver? Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. 1 Thessalonians 5:16-19. I don't think that ever penetrates you. That's teaching, rejoice always. I don't think that penetrates you until you start to really look at it yourself, to study it yourself, to think about it yourself. You can hear it from a preacher, but it doesn't really land on your heart as well as when you study it and when you write about it. If you have a journal, this would be a good one. 1 Thessalonians 5:16-19. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus. In these recent circumstances, that's what we should have all been doing. Rejoicing, giving thanks in the circumstances, for this is the will of God for you. And some of us did that, but the naysayers, the gloom and doomers, they made it worse, didn't they? Because they were so bitter about it all. And then they became angry at those who were trying to do this, to rejoice always, to pray without ceasing, to give thanks in the circumstances. In all circumstances, give thanks. And you'll see God's blessings too. For first of all, you will have a more confident spirit. Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed. Isaiah 41:10. Well, that's a command of God too. And in church, we've kept church going all this time. And it's one of the themes that Mr. S has used is fear not. It's really not God's will to live in fear. The only thing we should fear and respect is losing our souls. And that should be something that's always on our mind. Where is God in all of this? So to take a circumstance and to blow it up in your mind as being the most thing in the forefront, you've got things to do. You've got a house to keep. You've got children to raise. You have so much to do. You've got your laundry to do. And then, of course, these are formative years for your children. And they need to be happy. You need to create memories for them. You need to have celebrations for them and creative times with them, and ignore the news. Ignore what's going on. Because what does Isaiah 41:10 say? Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed. And remember, the Bible is the ultimate authority. For whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. 1 Corinthians 10:31. So see, that's what I have tried to do with these lessons, is share with you how just beginning your day is done to the glory of God, dressing up, trying to look pleasant, trying to feel good about yourself, and to inspire love from your family is so important. So with refinement, then what I'd like you to do is to work a little on your personality. And if you find in any kind of circumstances, like the current ones, that you become more sharp, that you have become more impatient and unhappy, I mean, you should be happy. And if you've become more unhappy, then you have lost the focus on what's important. And you've started to focus on what the world is doing. And that will rob your heart of, and it'll rob your soul of the part that belongs to God. So if you want to correct one little item of your personality, now some of you who haven't had children yet, aren't married yet, will be looking forward to having a family, but let me tell you, if you've got some personality flaw, you're going to pass that down to your children if you don't correct it. And then they're going to behave like that, and it's going to irritate you. You're going to know how it feels. And one of the problems that you might have is hasty, sharp, rude replies. That's the quickest way to ruin a friendship, ruin a marriage, ruin your relationship with your children. The quickest way to make someone hate you is a hasty, snappy retort. People that have gone to church for years and years and years, will one day surprise you and say something extremely rude. And I've often said that was, out of character. Where did that come from? That was always there. It's just that they never corrected it. It just kind of kept in the background. It's like the seed was there all the time. And so you need to root out things like that. Hasty, sharp retorts, rude replies, snappy, dismissing someone by retorting so sharply that they don't want to converse with you anymore. So if you want to correct one little item of your personality, stop with the sharp, hasty, quick retorts. Refinement school. In refinement school, we would have learned that the art of conversation. And you restrain yourself. You learn to restrain yourself. You learn to see. Modern psychology teaches you can't bury that kind of stuff, but we don't do that in Christianity because they think, the modern psychology says if you've got a resentment or hatred or anger, you don't bury it here because that'll give you a heart attack. Well, what we do is we take it to the Lord and we ask forgiveness, and we ask forgiveness of our brothers and sisters, and but we don't let it out. Like, there was that story of Pandora's box. There's a box full of evil things like hatred and criticism and resentment, and she was told not to open it. When she opened it, all that stuff got out and you couldn't get it back in. And so you might think, well, I'll be healthier if I behave in a sharp way with someone. I'll be healthier, be better, and they need it. Well, then you can never recall it, and you might have broken off a friendship that, even if you don't want to be friends, you've got your reputation to consider too. And so, and I've learned a lot of this as a preacher's wife too. You can't just go around telling people off, or your husband will lose his job. And so we're in this together. So when you become sharp, when you have hasty, sharp replies, now all this time, for 2 months now, people have quit going to church, and they haven't had the sermons and the reminders and the lessons. And so what have they been doing? Well, some of them who are weaker will have been watching the news or listening to the news. So they've had a new indoctrination, and they may go back to church, and not all will be well. You will think, oh, we're having church again. Everybody's back, and we're back in fellowship. But they might be crankier than ever because they've been listening to the indoctrination from the other side. So no matter how much you try to remind people that this is my Father's world, and he's controlling it, and that we need to be self-controlled and act like Christians no matter what the circumstances. And hasty, sharp replies are going to start coming back because they haven't been assembling, they haven't been in church, they haven't been reminded. People need to be reminded. And I want to tell you that an argument starts when you shoot back a hasty, sharp reply. That's always, it either, a wise person, if you shoot back an argument, like shoot back the opposite of what they've said or correct them very hastily and sharply, if they're wise, they will just not talk. They will just stop it right there because they know if they answer back, it's just going to be a back and forth argument. But not everybody is wise, especially young people and little children. They will talk back, and the mother and the father, who are used to just shouting them down all the time, they're the ones that need to refine themselves a little bit so they can get a better response out of their children. And remember, we're all growing up together, and it's not like you have the right to insult and give a sharp reply just because you're the parent. Well, yes, you can, but it doesn't mean you should. And so an argument starts when you shoot back a snappy, rude reply, or your conversation contains sarcasm. Now, sarcasm, some people think is just humor, but not always. There's a delicate thing going on there. You can't be sarcastic all the time, and you cannot get away with it with some people who are more sensitive. But when you get caught up in the news, I'm just warning you about this because it's going to take up space in your head, the news. When you get caught up in it, you replace that thinking part of your soul and your heart with the world's preaching. The news program is their pulpit, and they are the preachers. They're the world's preachers. And there's not more of them than there are of us, but they've got the airwaves. And I'm so happy when I see citizen journalists or people putting up their own videos on YouTube and other platforms, because now they have their news, and their news is the most accurate because they saw it and they experienced it. Whereas the media news, it is created for them, and they read it. It really, most of them have never seen any of it. They just read it, and they all read the same thing. So it's just, we knew someone that worked for the news media that was a Christian that quit because he said there is no investigative news. There's no real news. They just read whatever comes up over the wire to them, and every channel has the same news. And so, and a lot of it is staged too. So news program is their pulpit, and its power is, it's great power. Anytime you find that a report makes you anxious and makes you feel sharp and snappy, then you've been sucked in. And the way I have survived all of this is, and been happy and productive, is I didn't believe it. I have known about the news media since I was very young, and I knew what they did, and they can, they're social engineers. They can mobilize a population and mobilize the world into doing something, and they probably sit back and laugh while we all do it. But back in the olden days, do you remember if you went to a movie theater? Now, most of us weren't allowed to go to the movies, but sometimes there'd be a church party or something in which they'd rent an old film, and some Western or something, and just attached in the front of this film was a newsreel, and the newsreels would come on just before the movie, and the newsreel was actually indoctrination, and it would tell you what was going on in the world, and you always came away mad because, oh, those people over there in such and such a place, and it was all slanted. And even as young people, we kind of could see it. It was all very, very prejudiced. And so this is what they've done and what they continue to do to this day. So now I'm going to continue a little bit with some other things here. And for ladies, I have a book here, and I'm sure it will be controversial, but it's called "Home is Where the Heart Is," and it's amazing what the world can make controversial. If you decide to be a homemaker, they can create a subject of controversy around it so that you'll have trouble doing it. If you want to teach your children at home, they'll create controversy around it. 100 years ago, no one thought anything of it. Everybody learned at home. You only went to a higher institution if you wanted to study further on a subject, but your basics were from home. And now they create a controversy over it. If you want to sew your own clothes, somebody's going to make a controversy over it. If you wanted to all dress alike at home, let's say you wanted to have a photograph taken and so you made clothes and everybody's kind of dressed in the same color or similar, somebody's going to make a controversy out of it. So their power is to make a controversy out of something to intimidate you and prevent you from going further with your goals. Well, this book is called Home is Where the Heart Is, and it's the paintings in it are by Thomas Kinkade. Now, I know the news media has said some things about Thomas Kinkade, but knowing what I know about the news media, I would have to investigate it further before believing it. In any case, the paintings in this book and the sayings that he has put in here, he's put sayings by famous people in here, like Washington Irving. Remember, he was the one that wrote the story, The Wife, that I read to you. He's got some quotes by Washington Irvington in here. And his paintings, you know, the Bible says sweet water and bitter water cannot exist in the same stream. His paintings don't indicate anything that say that he would be corrupt or anything like that. And I don't see anything in here. I had this for homeschooling because I lived before they even had curriculum. They didn't have the catalogs. They didn't have anything. So I just took what I could find that was out there. And the 1980s was a very refining era, and people were looking for. This is when home interiors came out, and when Laura Ashley and her clothing and many similar ones came out, and the painting was about and the home was being more exalted. So I wanted to just show you, and the pictures, of course, are more, I would say, 18th, 19th century, and I will put some of these on here, but this is what it looks like. The Home is Where the Heart Is, by Thomas Kinkade, so I'll read some of this for you. This is the Washington Irving quote. It was the policy of the good old gentleman to make his children feel that home was the happiest place in the world, and I value this delicious home feeling as one of the choicest gifts a parent can bestow. A close-knit, loving home is worth more than a kingdom. And then there are little enlarged pieces of this is one of my favorite paintings of his. And this had a good influence on my family, and it's wholesome. It's houses and home. And when you look at it, even our economy it rotates around the home, doesn't it? You go to a hardware store. What are you looking for? Things for the home. You're looking for faucets and bolts and nails and things to help improve your home, and paint. And it's mostly about the home. And you go anywhere to any place that's one of your favorites, it is probably focused on doing something to enhance the home. Our natural and happiest life is when we lose ourselves in the exquisite absorption of the home. Home, in one form or another, is the great object of life. And then he has that verse in it. By wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it is established. Through knowledge its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures, from Proverbs. And of course, one of my favorite, that's my house someday. And what I liked about it is this is the way houses used to be, and still are. Sweet is the hour that brings us home, where all will spring to meet us, where hands are striving as we come to be the first to greet us. When the world hath spent its frowns and wrath, and care has been sorely pressing, 'tis sweet to turn from our roving path, and find a fireside blessing. Oh, joyfully dear is the homeward track, if we are but sure of a welcome back. That's by a poet from the 19th century. No place is home until two people have latch keys. Every home where love abides and friendship is a guest is surely home, and home sweet home, for there the heart can rest. O fortunate, O happy day, when a new household finds its place among the myriad homes of earth, like a new star has just sprung birth. Mid pleasures and palaces though we may roam, be it ever so humble, there's no place like home. She lay back and listened to the little domestic sounds of the old house. The fire whispered, a log shifted in its heart, the dog snored gently after his meal. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, and somewhere a distant door banged as the breeze caught it. Gradually, the peace that surrounded her took effect. Isn't that the way it is? You settle down, not going anywhere, and there's a bit of a commotion, getting into the house and closing the door, and then gradually the peace that surrounded her took effect. You're going to feel that. It has been a long day, and tomorrow would be an even harder one. But meantime, the children slept as soundly as the dog on the rug at her feet, and the night enfolded the quiet house. And it's from a book called Miss Read, R-E-A-D. I have never read any of the Miss Read, were they mystery novels? But I haven't ever seen them. I wonder if they were English, but I have never seen them here. But I'd be curious. I see from my house by the side of the road, by the side of the highway of life, the men who press with the ardor of hope, the men who are faint with the strife. But I turn not away from their smiles nor their tears. Both parts of that infinite plan. Let me live in my house by the side of the road, and be a friend to man. And here's another verse. Every day they continued to meet together. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts. And from the book of Acts. Now this is a quote by Lucy Maud Montgomery, who wrote Anne of Green Gables and all the Anne books. The first glimpse of her new home was a delight to the eye and spirit. The door of the little house opened, and a warm glow of firelight flickered into the dusk. Gilbert lifted Anne from the buggy and led her into the garden, through the little gate between the ruddy-tipped firs, up the red path to the sandstone step. "Welcome home," he whispered, and in hand they stepped over the threshold of their house of dreams. Lucy Maud Montgomery, Anne's House of Dreams. And here's a Jane Austen quote. "Ah, there's nothing like staying home for real comfort." And I'd like to read you this Edgar A. Guest poem. And this is all embellished by Thomas Kincaid's beautiful paintings. And I think this was done, and in fact there's a picture of his family when they were little, when the children were young. There, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it looked like they had a little boy too. So I find that interesting. And it was by Harvest House Publishing. "'Tis a little old house with a squeak in the stairs, and a porch that seemed made for just 2 easy chairs. In the yard is a group of geraniums red, and a glorious old-fashioned peony bed. Petunias and pansies and larkspurs are there, proclaiming their love for the old-fashioned pair." Just need to write down something I thought of, because otherwise it'll be gone with the wind. Oh, it's hard now to picture the peace of that place. Never lovelier smile lit on a fair woman's face than the smile of the little old lady who sits on the porch through the bright days of summer and knits, and a courtlier manner no prince ever had than the little old man that she speaks of as Dad. In that little old house there is nothing of hate. There are old-fashioned things by an old-fashioned grate. On the walls there are pictures of fine-looking men and beautiful ladies to look at, and then time has placed on the mantel to comfort them there the pictures of grandchildren radiantly fair. Every part of the house seems to whisper of joy, save the trinkets that speak of a lost little boy. Yet time has long since soothed the hurt and the pain, and his glorious memories only remain. The laughter of children the old walls have known, and the joy of it stays, though the babies have flown. I am fond of that house and that old-fashioned pair, and the glorious calm that is hovering there. The riches of life are not silver and gold, but fine sons and daughters when we are grown old. And I pray when the years shall have silvered our hair, we shall know the delights of that old-fashioned pair. Cheerfully share your house with those who need a meal or a place to stay for the night. And that is a paraphrase of something in 1 Peter. Here's another one. by Edgar A. Guest. I had told you about him before, so I won't give you his autobiography here. Sittin' on the porch at night when the tasks are done, just restin' there a-talkin' with my easy slippers on, and my shirt band thrown wide open and my feet upon the rail, oh, it's then I'm at my richest, with a wealth that cannot fail. For the scent of early roses seems to flood the evening air, and a throne of downright gladness in my wicker rocking chair. The dog asleep beside me, and the children romping round with their shrieks of merry laughter. Oh, there is no gladder sound to the ears of weary mortals, spite all the scoffers say, or a grander bit of music than the children at their play. And I tell myself times over when I'm sittin' there at night that the world in which I'm livin' in is a place of real delight. Then the moon begins its climbin', and the stars shine overhead, and the mother calls the children, and she takes 'em up to bed. And I smoke my pipe in silence, and I think so many things, and balance up my riches with the lonesomeness of kings. And I come to this conclusion, and I'll wager that I'm right, that I'm happier than they are sitting on my porch at night. Isn't that lovely? Wish I could just sit here and read the rest of it to you. I don't know who some of these authors are that he's included. Okay, here's another one by Edgar Guest. Lord, this humble house we'd keep sweet with play and calm with sleep. Help us so that we may give beauty to the lives we live. Let thy love and thy grace shine upon our dwelling place. Edgar A. Guest. That's a beautiful poem. Maybe I can write that down for you on the post. So ladies, I hope you got a lot done. I hope you got a bedroom cleaned up. And I hope you have a lovely day, and get dressed and get your house cleaned up so that it will serve you, and read something that will improve you, and write yourself a newsletter. So I'll talk to you later. Bye.